So in light of the situation regarding the Iranian war that's been going on in the Middle East, I stumbled across a video by Willem, Petzer, a guy that I've been subscribed to for quite a while now. He's very good with his political analysis in South Africa. He's been discussing the whole ramifications of the war and what it means for South Africa, especially in terms of oil prices and all of that kind of stuff. So I thought I would go ahead and react to that today. So let us get into it.
South Africa's petrol and diesel pumps are drying up fast. More and more petrol stations are even reporting running out of fuel every single day. And heavy users of diesel, such as farmers, are currently being rationed on their diesel usage. Many farmers have already contacted us about not being able to buy enough diesel for their own usage. All of the signs are there that we are on the brink of a major fuel shortage in this country.
Yeah.
An economic disaster which could hit us even before the massive price increases scheduled for the beginning of April, which, as we've seen from previous such price increases, will probably never go down again. But the reality is that we can stand here and point the finger at Iran.
I think the current estimates from what I've seen were roughly about a 6 to 8 rand increase in petrol from what I've seen.
Or America or Israel as much as we like. The fact of the matter is that the shortages that we are now experiencing in this country, as the pumps dry up, can only be laid at the feet of the ANC government.
Yep.
As I will explain in this video, the war in Iran is only the final straw, or single piece of straw actually, that broke this camel's back. All of this could have been avoided despite the current war, if not for the ANC government. More reports are gradually emerging every day of fuel shortages becoming a crisis across South Africa. For example, earlier this week, Boere Korporatief Beperk, known as BKB Limited, a major agricultural and retail provider in this country, announced it would be introducing rations for both diesel and petrol, limiting vehicles.
And this is where I think, people are so... people definitely show their naivety when it comes to these kind of matters. You will have people talking to you and telling you, oh, but what on earth does a war in Iran or a war in any other country, how on earth would that affect us here locally? What kind of ramifications would there be? You have to scratch your head at people like that, people who say such ignorant, idiotic things. It affects absolutely everything. It's clearly people don't understand what geopolitics is. People clearly don't understand what and how interconnected the world is these days. And those kind of people just live in such a sheltered, secure bubble that they have no idea and no concept of really the real world and how it actually all pieces together. They think that somehow petrol just magically comes from the petrol station. And when there's no more petrol, it just magically appears once again in the petrol tanks. Anyway.
To 80 liters of diesel per vehicle per day, or 45 liters per vehicle per day of petrol. Moreover, even cargo trucks are now being limited to 80 liters of diesel per day. According to reports, a large number of petrol stations in at least 5 of the 9 provinces of South Africa have already run dry of diesel. Every day, more and more fuel stations and depots are running out of supplies. And all the signs are there that South Africa is quickly heading towards a major crisis where diesel and petrol shortages can contribute to doing massive damage to the economy, on top of majorly disrupting people's lives and even threatening their livelihoods.
And also because of the failures of the ANC, we don't have any train system here in South Africa. All our produce, all our products come solely from road. There is no other way we acquire, we get delivered anything else. There's no other mechanism or means to get anything else. It is only by road, by truck. And the incompetence of the ANC, that is legendary, actually. You have to work really, really hard to be this incompetent. It's actually incredible.
The reality is that this could happen within a matter of days from today. All of this, of course, blamed on the ongoing war in the Middle East between Israel and the United States on the one hand, and Iran on the other hand. Yet, the hard reality is that this conflict on the other side of the planet would not have affected us at all if the ANC had not run this country's own oil refining infrastructure, which they inherited from the previous regime, into the ground.
Yet, it's always the thing, they will continually blame the white people. They got handed 6 oil refineries from the oppressive white people. 6. There's currently 2 operational. And it's not enough.
Here at the Willem Petzer Group, we have always advocated neutrality when it comes to international conflicts between nations that have nothing to do with us. We firmly believe that people should have the right to remain neutral and nuanced in their opinions on international conflicts and not be drawn into other people's business by their own governments.
Sure.
However, the current conflict in the Middle East is bound to have a major economic impact on us here in South Africa.
Of course.
And although the fuel prices are only expected to skyrocket in a little over a week's time, we are in fact already feeling the effects of this conflict in the refined petroleum shortages, which has the potential to become exponentially worse over the next week and a half, even before the scheduled price increases of up to 7 rands per litre for diesel or for April. Now, of course, on a surface level, one could make the argument to place the blame for this on the parties involved in the current conflict in the Middle East.
Which they will, of course.
After all, the disruption of the global fuel supply is a direct result.
Because I suppose the idea is, Trump is a bad white man because he wants to go after and neutralize Iran's capabilities to ever build nuclear weaponry. So Trump is a bad man because he wants to do that, and he wants to bring down a dictatorial, oppressive regime who kills their own people, not unlike the ANC, weirdly. So Trump is the bad man. He's the one that's actually oppressing us, and they'll spin it with, you see people, this bad man, Trump, he's the one that's causing the fuel prices to go up. He's the one that's oppressing us. It's always the oppressors, the actual ones, that are oppressed by the imaginary oppressor, but really what it comes down to is they're oppressed by their own lack of capability and lack of ingenuity to solve problems. They were handed 6 refineries. The ANC government, they decided to close them down. All but 2. They decided to close them down, yet somehow it's always because of oppressive apartheid. It's always because of oppressive white supremacy. White supremacy gave these people 6 operational refineries. Them, out of their own accord, thought fit to go ahead and decommission 4 of them. So you're left with 2, but somehow the bad oppressive white man is always to blame, when the bad oppressive white man was the one that gave you the refineries and you of your own accord decided to shut them down. communist, Marxist mentality is it is going to be the death of everybody, really.
Of a war that has disrupted cargo in the Strait of Hormuz, blocking a key route that carries about 20% of the world's oil, creating a global shortage and pushing prices up everywhere. Iran, which controls the northern side of the strait, has responded to attacks by the US and Israel by disrupting this globally imported shipping route. For example, by deploying their navy forces, laying sea mines, seizing tankers, and warning that vessels risk attack if they pass through here. In response, the US and its allies have increased their naval presence, and escorts carried out strikes in the strait and tried to keep the passage open. But the heightened risk of attacks, insurance costs, and potential damage have led many commercial oil tanking companies to avoid this route altogether. This effectively choked off a major portion of global oil supply. While Iran has promised to keep the strait open for its allies, which we know of course explicitly includes South Africa, that promise is becoming increasingly difficult to.
And that's another point. You'll always find the people that lie for a living, i.e. the ANC government, they've made countless promises. I mean, I'm pretty sure the folks in the UK and America and Europe under, barring Trump, but I mean the idea that we've all become accustomed to people with a, shall we say, socialist, Marxist mentality. We've all become increasingly accustomed to the idea that these sorts of people will blatantly lie in order to keep themselves in power and in order to get themselves in power. That becomes their modus operandi, so to speak. It becomes the way they function. Because it becomes the way they function, they are incapable of discerning what a lie and the truth is, because they're so used to lying. So, when they form allies, in the South African instance, the ANC forms an alliance with Iran, known liars. It's easy to go ahead and deceive the ANC, because they're so accustomed to lying that when they get lied to with empty promises, the same empty promises that they tell South Africans, they see it as a, well, we can take this kind of talk to the bank. Iran is clearly going to honor their word because we don't know how to differentiate between a lie and the truth ourselves, because we lie all the time. The lie, in fact, becomes the truth.
Keep in light of the warfare increasingly taking place in and around this extremely narrow strait. So, Iran can't realistically guarantee safety, even if it wants to do so. The reality is that before the conflict even started, there were on average 138 ships passing through the strait every single day. And in the 3 weeks since the start of this conflict, there has been barely 100 ships in this entire time passing through. Yet, the hard reality that we must face today is that South Africa should actually by rights be completely immune to this crisis.
We should.
You see, the conflict in the Middle East shouldn't affect us at all.
No.
And it wouldn't have had it not been for the ANC. You see, while we are dependent on the Strait of Hormuz for importing the 70% of refined petroleum products that we use in South Africa today, our crude oil itself comes almost...
Like, how insane is that? How insane is that? The fact that we even have to come to the point where we need 70% of our oil, our refined fuel, to come from outside the country. It's absolutely insane. The levels of incompetence and incapability is baffling.
Exclusively from other African countries such as Nigeria, Angola and Ghana.
So there you go. So we get crude oil from these countries, had we had the refining capabilities, because we still had our refining installation still operational, we wouldn't have had this issue.
Routes that pass by the western side of the African continent that do not pass anywhere near the Middle East checkpoint.
Yeah.
By the end of apartheid, South Africa had 6 functioning oil refineries, and the country's total liquid fuel refining capacity reached roughly 700,000 barrels per day. This was made up of about 500,000 barrels of crude oil refined, plus around 200,000 barrels of synthetic coal-based fuel. A process South Africa was world-renowned for be the first to implement under the previous regime. Yet, today, the country only has 2 of those refineries left. And our only 2 remaining refineries process only a quarter of what the previous regime managed, or just under 200,000 barrels per day. This marks a decline of 71% since the 80s. This is 500,000 barrels of refined petroleum products that we produce less every day than our country did during the 80s.
And yet the mentality from mainstream media and from the politicians themselves, when they do their little cute press briefings, it will always be, we're making progress. In their imaginary world, in their dystopian utopia that they continually sell people, and again, it's getting so bad in the rest of the world, I don't even need to inform the American and European audiences at this point. The idea that these people would want to glaze us with this rhetoric about somehow it's getting better when your eyes can clearly see it's actually getting far, far worse. Again, under Trump, it's a little bit different. He's a based individual. He seems to know what he's doing. But the days of being lied to for the sake of keeping people in power that clearly do not deserve the power, it's the equivalent of having the village idiot who everybody ostracized and pushed out of the town because they don't want anything to do with him. It's the equivalent of getting that kind of person into town, and not just into town, but into leadership to rule over us. Because somehow the village idiot has got some weird special connection to some other strange ideology that's going to make somehow magically everybody's life better. And it's this same village idiot, or should I rather say village idiots, the mentality of it, which is really Marxist and socialist. Somehow that ideology is continually sold to the rest of us as enlightenment and the way to progress. This is why they continually glaze us with, oh no, we're actually making progress. It might seem to you that things are getting worse, things are getting more expensive, things are getting just more terrible on a day-to-day basis. It's okay, these things are simply just growth pains. Soon, you will experience the utopia that I've got in my mind. Don't worry, just keep going. We'll all end up in our graves.
This means that only 30% of our petrol and diesel is now refined locally. You see, South Africa imports the majority of its crude oil from Nigeria rather than the Middle East. In fact, we import no crude oil from the Middle East. This means that the country is far less directly dependent on supply routes like the Strait of Hormuz by Iran than the mainstream media would put it to you. However, South Africa's vulnerability is not in where it sources our crude oil, but in the limited domestic refining capacity. if the current government had only maintained local refining infrastructure or expanded it by population growth.
That's the thing, they wouldn't have even needed to come up with anything new. They wouldn't have even have to come up with anything different, anything new. All they would have to do, all they had to do, they had one job. Fundamentally, the ANC government had one job. That was simply to maintain that which they inherited from the bad white man. They had to maintain it. It was already there for them, yet they still have the audacity to go ahead and say, the white man is the reason we're struggling. The white man is the reason we're oppressed. That oppressive white man gave you the country. You are the one that failed.
And economic growth, instead of destroying 3/4 of the refining plants that the old regime built, the country could have imported sufficient crude oil from Nigeria or Angola or Ghana to meet our full fuel demand independently.
Utter failure.
In this scenario, disruptions or conflicts around the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East would have had no practical impact on South Africa's fuel security. And of course, in this scenario, our fuel prices would have been much cheaper today, even before the conflict started, like it was decades earlier. As South Africa as a country would not have needed to rely on importing refined fuel, which is exposed to these global checkpoints like the one in Iran, and which is also much more expensive than importing crude oil and refining it ourselves, very much like the old regime could manage under worldwide sanctions in the 80s. You see, all this goes to show is that South Africa's current fuel vulnerability is the direct consequence of this ANC government's incompetence and mismanagement of what they had inherited from the previous government,
exactly right.
which has led to the dismantling of a once functional system that could have shielded the country almost entirely from these external shock. At its peak, with roughly 700,000 barrels per day of refining and synthetic fuel capacity during the 80s, South Africa had the ability to meet its own fuel needs from crude sourced solely from Africa through routes that are completely unaffected by Middle Eastern checkpoints, as well as from our own coal under our own soil.
And there you go. You know, you'll often find the black people. They always like talking about, BBBEE, if that's how many B's and E's there are. They're always talking about upliftment of the black community. Wouldn't it be more beneficial then, therefore, for the broader black community if you had to expand that mentality to the whole of Africa? Wouldn't it be more beneficial to keep the oil refineries which you had, so that you wouldn't have to send money outside of the continent of Africa, but you would keep it in the continent of Africa, therefore uplifting the entire continent of Africa? Because you have certain black people that are all about Pan-Africanism, which is essentially attempting to unite Africa as a whole, the entire continent, unto one kind of leadership. So this is why the whole idea, the whole mentality of BBBEE and economic empowerment and affirmative action, it's got nothing to do with the concern and upliftment of black people. Because if it did, you would have the foresight to say, okay, well then why on earth shouldn't we keep the money within the African continent as a whole and trade amongst ourselves, therefore uplifting the entire continent, if that of course was your plan. But this is why they don't really care about it. It's a trope, and it's a cheap trick, and it's an empty promise for the sake of, no, really, actually what we want to do is we want to take the easiest way out as possible. If that just so happens that we can do it within the country, or within the continent, fine. But actually, if that goes against our real desire, which is actually just to simply be lazy and just to lie, cheat, and steal, then we'll find some other way, even if it means looking outside of the continent, outside of the black people, which we care so much about, just for the sake of making it easier on ourselves and going ahead and importing if we need to, because it's all about just making their lives as easy and as pushy and as materialistic as possible, all the while still acting like the victim. Because once again, the richest people, the richest South Africans, the richest corrupt people that are in power doing the most amount of fraud are always the biggest victims, because somehow there's always the invisible hand over them of white oppression.
Had that capacity not only been maintained but expanded in line with population and economic growth, the present disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz would have been little more than background noise to us today, and our petrol would have been far cheaper.
Yep.
There would be no rationing or no empty pumps and no looming threat to agriculture, transport or industry had the government only maintained what it inherited. Instead, what we see today is the predictable outcome of years of neglect
That's
and
right.
regulatory paralysis
That's right.
and ideological hostility towards industrial
They had
self-sufficiency,
one job.
coupled with extreme corruption and incompetence by the fools running South Africa. South Africa under the ANC has traded the resilience for dependence, the resilience that was once able to keep this country running on fuel despite global sanctions.
That's
Half
right.
a million barrels per day lost in refining
Thanks to the
capacity
liberals.
since the 1980s now threatens the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people in this country, because a far-off Middle Eastern war suddenly turns into a domestic crisis that could have been completely avoided.
Yep.
The result is that ordinary South Africans are forced to bear the cost of supply insecurity and the economic strain of a crisis that was entirely preventable through only maintaining something that you inherited, that somebody else had built.
That's
You
right.
didn't even have to build any of these refining plants
yeah.
yourself. All you had to do, ANC government,
Simply
was
maintain.
maintain them. One can criticize and blame the parties involved in the war all one wants, but the hard reality is that
It's a
South
cope.
Africa
Yeah.
could
It's a
have
cope,
been
of course.
completely shielded from this disruption in global oil supply if
Yeah.
we had a competent government, or at least competent enough to not
Exactly.
destroy the
Exactly
infrastructure that it had inherited. In a recent video, we highlighted how the killing of Iran's supreme leader in this current conflict has led to the ANC losing the last of its real friends or international friends. Check out that analysis
Yeah,
by
they don't
clicking
really
on
have
this link appearing on your screen right now.
Yeah.
And remember to support our work by becoming a paying member of the Willem Petzer group. Only with your investment are we able to do enough research to produce videos like these every day. Simply follow the steps on the banner underneath me. Goodbye and God bless. South Africa.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, I think in the grand scheme of things, I think the Marxist, liberal, socialist understanding of reality, which obviously is subjective, because they deal with subjective relativism. Somehow, I bet the ANC and every Marxist, socialist that's got a bend towards white hatred, a bend towards really fundamentally Christian hatred, is this idea of somehow the utopia that we're going to reach is only going to be capable of being reached when all, we can lump the Jews into this as well, you know, when the Jews and the white people are all eradicated, and then somehow the creativity, the capability that the white people have had all along, when they get eliminated by us, which is clearly the plan. When they get eliminated, somehow there's going to be a cosmic realignment, almost, so to speak, where all the stars are going to align, and somehow the magic that the white people, the magic that the Jews had of the ingenuity and the creativity, is going to somehow trickle down to every person on earth that is alive, which would obviously just be your socialist Marxists and the Islamists. And that, I suppose, is debatable in terms of how many socialist Marxists are actually going to be around after Islam takes control of the entire planet. And once that happens, then we're going to have the ingenuity and the creativity that the Jews and the white people had. And then we can somehow magically make the infrastructure, make the economic systems, make the spaceships, make the flying cars, make the unicorns and the rainbows that we so desperately want and envision in our minds. It's more akin to a Netflix fantasy series that these guys are playing with. It's got no bearing on reality. It's a ridiculous, a child's dream that will never come about. When you think about it, it baffles the brain to think, how on earth can people be so stupid and be in power? And yeah, it is suicidal empathy, literally suicidal empathy, because at the end of the day, the people that they are oppressing are the same ones that put them in the positions in order for them to oppress them. And in closing, this is, I just heard as well that apparently Trump seems to be winding down the whole war in Iran. So whether it happens or doesn't happen, the fact remains, and whether the petrol price does go up, the fuel price, whether it goes up or not, it's the whole idea of we've got this weird, almost like a Stockholm syndrome that we've become so accustomed to here in South Africa. Well, shall I say, the vast majority of us, it does seem, has become so accustomed to this Stockholm syndrome that even should the petrol price not happen, which is incredibly unlikely, chances are it will happen, it probably will, somehow we'll go back to celebrating. I mean, the ANC's just had their stupid little march today, because it's Human Rights Day, their silly little march about how we will not be bullied because of Brent Bozell and the things that he said, which is just objectively true. Kill the poor, kill the farmer is just objective hate speech. But, so they've had their little march, because they will not be bullied, and they want their sovereignty, but really, sovereignty is just synonymous with they want the ability to oppress their people and get away with it. And yet their same people will go out and march on their behalf. It's that kind of Stockholm syndrome that so many people have just become so enamored with and are so used to in South Africa. That's why I truly hope that Europe, the UK, and America, I really hope you guys wake up to this kind of stuff, because man, it is going to be the destruction of your countries. And on that happy note, because at the end of the day, if you're a Christian, it's just death, right? So at the end of the day, I'll leave you guys with that, and I will check you on the next one. Cheers.